The rain had started just as the two sisters stepped out of the Ayala Center in Cebu City. It was early evening on July 16, 1997, and the pavement outside the mall carried the reflection of neon lights and passing cars. Jacqueline and Marijoy Chiong stood under the awning with the confidence of girls who had done this routine many times. They were waiting for their father to pick them up. They were 19 and 21, close enough in age to share plans, errands, and the comfort of familiar spaces. Nothing about their body language suggested danger. They were focused on the curb, scanning for their ride, unaware that their disappearance would soon become one of the most discussed murder cases in the Philippines. Witnesses later told investigators about a white car circling the driveway near the mall exit. At the time, no one paid much attention. Cars hovered there constantly, either collecting passengers or looking for parking. What happened next was remembered only in fragments. A brief stop, a sudden movement, maybe a shout. No one understood what they were seeing until later, when those fragments became statements. The sisters were forced into a car that did not belong to them, and within seconds they vanished into the traffic and rainfall of the city. Their family realized something was wrong almost immediately. When the girls did not come home, calls went out to friends, neighbors, and local stations. Their father retraced the route from the mall, checking sidewalks, storefronts, and places where someone might have taken shelter from the rain. There was no sign of them. As night turned into morning, worry hardened into dread. The sisters had no pattern of staying out late, no arguments, no reason to disappear. By sunrise, the family reported them missing. 2 days later, on July 18th, a truck driver pulled over near a ravine in Sitio Tanawan, Karkar. Something on the slope caught his eye. When authorities arrived, they discovered the body of a young woman. The injuries were severe and indicated assault, torture, and murder. Clothing was torn. There were signs of prolonged violence. When the Chiong family traveled to the site, the identification came with immediate grief. The victim was Marijoy. Jacqueline remained missing. The brutality of the discovery forced investigators to act quickly. They built a timeline around the sisters' last known location, focusing on the white car seen circling the mall. Officers canvassed neighborhoods, questioning people who lived near the Ayala Center. Several witnesses described seeing a group of young men near the parking lot that night. Their statements pointed toward suspects who were already known to the police, some with reputations for aggression, others coming from influential families. One name surfaced repeatedly: Francisco Juan Paco Larrañaga. Others named included Rowan Adlawan, James Andrew Uy, and several more who would soon be charged. Investigators reconstructed the movements that night based on multiple witness accounts. According to statements later presented in court, the sisters were abducted from the mall, taken into the car, and transported to various locations before being driven south toward Karkar. One witness described the women being assaulted and held down in the vehicle. Another accounted for how Marijoy's body was disposed of at the ravine. On Jacqueline, the testimony ended abruptly. She was last seen alive with the group. Her body was never found. As the suspects were identified, the case moved into a national spotlight. The Chiong family was devastated, but publicly determined. They attended hearings, fielded interviews, and pleaded for justice. Media outlets reported every development: the combination of the victims' ages, the violence inflicted, and the backgrounds of the suspects pushed the case into a tense public space. People followed the story closely, forming strong opinions before the trial even began. The arrests came in phases. Once the 7 suspects were charged, prosecutors assembled a case built on direct testimony, circumstantial evidence, and forensic findings. A key witness testified that he had been with the group that night and that the sisters were forcibly taken, assaulted, and transported out of Cebu City. His recollections, later scrutinized heavily, placed all the defendants at different points of the crime. Defense teams argued alibis, contradictions, and inconsistencies, but the court accepted the testimony as credible and admitted it alongside other evidence. Throughout the proceedings, the Chiong family sat through descriptions of violence that no parent should ever have to hear. The courtroom heard details about the abduction, the assault, and the disposal of Marijoy's body. They also heard evidence about Jacqueline's final known moments, despite her body never having been recovered. For the family, the absence of her remains was a particular pain. They spoke often about wanting something to bury, even if it was only the confirmation that she was gone. By May 1999, the trial concluded. The verdict was firm. Larrañaga and 6 co-accused were convicted of kidnapping and serious illegal detention with homicide and rape. The court emphasized the deliberate nature of the crime, the coordinated actions of the group, and the horrific suffering inflicted on the victims. Sentences were severe. Some defendants received reclusion perpetua. Others received death sentences. Supporters of the Chiong family felt the ruling brought justice. Supporters of some defendants insisted the case had been shaped by pressure and incomplete evidence. But the ruling stood. The Supreme Court later upheld the verdict. When the Philippines abolished capital punishment in 2006, the death sentences were commuted to life imprisonment. Larrañaga was later transferred to Spain under a prisoner transfer treaty. The remaining defendants continued serving their sentences in the Philippines. Legal debates persisted for years. Documentaries, appeals, and public discussions kept the case alive in national memory. But the courts maintained their decision. The sisters had been abducted, assaulted, and murdered, and the group of 7 had been responsible. For the Chiong family, none of the procedural movements changed the reality. Jacqueline and Marijoy had left the mall expecting an ordinary ride home. Instead, they crossed paths with people who saw them as targets. Marijoy's body was found 2 days later at the bottom of a ravine. Jacqueline's final moments remained unknown, sealed in silence by the men who never revealed where she was taken. For their parents, anniversaries became painful markers of a night that ended 2 lives and fractured their own permanently. The murder of the Chiong sisters became one of the most polarizing cases in Philippine history. It created fear, debates about privilege and power, and discussions about the limits of certainty in violent crimes with complex witness testimony. But for their family, it was never a political argument. It was never a public spectacle. It was the loss of 2 daughters whose lives ended on a rainy night in Cebu, taken by people who left behind grief that has never lifted. Thank you for listening to Homicide Files. Subscribe for more true crime stories.